What's up, football fans? Welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Around. I am Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach KT Smith. Coach, what's going on?
What's up, Jeff? Great weekend of football to talk about. So excited to get to it.
I don't know how great it was. I don't know what you were watching. The Steelers forgot to show up in Buffalo, but that's something I'm sure we'll talk about. But overall, did you think it was a good wild card weekend? I mean, we'll talk about the minutia here during the show, but what's your overarching take on it?
I mean, I'm a football geek, so I just love to watch the game, especially when you get to the postseason, because now, these guys are competing for the thing that they've set their sights on their whole lives. I really love watching any sport at its highest level of competition, but especially football. It's funny you said the Steelers didn't show up, but I went into work on Tuesday morning, and the Eagles fans were let's distraught is not a strong enough adjective to describe them. And the one thing that they kept saying was, at least the Steelers fought back. At least the Steelers fought back, which I guess they have a point. I mean, Pittsburgh buried themselves in a hole, but did manage to make it a game late, whereas Philadelphia just looked like they couldn't wait to be anywhere other than on a football field.
Yeah, that Philly game was rough. That was rough, and we'll talk about it. Let's get this show. Let's get it off the ground here. In case it's your first time tuning in, the Whip Around. We don't talk about every single game in the playoffs. We will in some way, shape, or form, but we talk about like the big burning topics around the NFL. So let's start off with, during the wild card weekend, you could definitely see some players' stock improve. Like, it's rising. Like, they played well. You play well in the playoffs. That's noticeable. Sometimes that can get you a new contract. Sometimes that could get you a lot of money. You saw Baker Mayfield hit an incentive where I think he got like over $2 million for winning a playoff game for Tampa Bay, like a crazy amount of money. So when you look at the wild card, though, which player, which performance did you think might have elevated a player's stock or overall view in the league?
I think the guy who's now played himself into the conversation of the league's elite quarterbacks was Jordan Love. He was spectacular against Dallas. We saw, as Steelers fans, we saw him earlier in the year against Pittsburgh, and he played okay. He looked like a guy at the time who could make some really nice throws, but was going to hurt you with a big turnover. Later on in the season, he's sort of self-corrected as far as that goes. And in that Dallas game, he made every throw. He was poised. He took some shots, man. I mean, there was one play where Micah Parsons like literally launches himself, and I mean, it's a penalty every day of the week except for, I guess, against Micah Parsons in Dallas. It's a penalty if it's a more established quarterback. But he takes a shot to the head and winds up throwing a dime 35 yards down the field to Romeo Doubs. I just thought he played the way that Dallas fans have been begging Dak Prescott to play in a big game. So as far as being impressed by a single individual, he's the guy who stood out the most for me.
So I thought about this, and I decided to go in a non-quarterback route. Because I think quarterbacks are easy because they're obviously the focal point of every single play. They have the ball in their hands. I'm going to go with Puka Nacua. Now, Puka Nacua was already good, and he was always considered to be the Robin to Cooper Kupp's Batman. I don't know if I'm saying that anymore. I mean, Cooper Kupp he's been banged up the last few years, and I want to give him that's important. He missed the first portion of this season due to injury. But I watched that Rams and Lions game, and he just jumped off the screen. It's almost as if he can't be covered, just regular one-on-one. We saw him as Steeler fans when the Steelers went out to L.A., and he torched the Steelers. It's amazing what this guy's doing. I saw someone try to compare him to Hines Ward. I'm not going to go that far, but at the same time, that dude is a complete receiver. And you talk about an embarrassment of riches. They have it at the wide receiver position with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. I thought he played a great game, even in the loss. Had over 100 yards. I think he scored one touchdown. Just tremendous play. I love watching that guy play.
The thing that jumped out to me about him was how hard he was to get onto the ground after he caught the ball. Runs like a running back, runs routes like an elite receiver. That's an awesome combination. And you're right. I think the injuries have taken their toll on Cooper Kupp. Now he might bounce back next year, but in that playoff game, Nacua looked like the guy, and Kupp was the sort of the complement.
I would also say your boy Pacheco from Kansas City. Boy, did he have a good game, and is someone he runs it. The way he physically runs is kind of funny. When you watch him run, he just doesn't have a normal gait. He just kind of chops his feet a lot. I thought that was a hell of a performance too. And he already had his stock that was pretty high. To me, it got elevated because in a game where you knew the ground game was going to be vital with the temperatures to where they were and the wind. And yeah, Kansas City aired it out more than we thought they would. But I'm going to give some love to him as well. And it's a New Jersey boy, isn't it?
Yeah, heck yeah, man. 24-year-old Isaiah Pacheco runs exactly like 16-year-old Isaiah Pacheco did. It's funny. And yeah, guys, you get to a point where you don't want to tackle that anymore. He's not the biggest back in the world, but when he's running that hard and he's looking for the contact down the field, the thing I like about his style is he makes that one cut. It's that sharp cut. The shoulders are always square. And at the end of the run, he always looks for contact because he wants to be going forward. He's a little bit like Jaylen Warren in that sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's been a pleasure to watch his evolution. Man, South Jersey, our league is really showing up. We had 3 guys. Bo Melton has really come on for the Packers. And then the safety Marquise Bell in Dallas is another one of the guys from our league that we played against. So it was fun to watch all those guys.
Absolutely. Now let's go to the other side of the docket. We talked about like the big winners. Let's talk about the big losers. So when you're talking about a team or individual players, who would be the biggest loser for you of Wild Card Weekend?
Well, I got to double down on the Cowboys here. It's a tough call because you got some good candidates, but yeah, how do you not, right? I think Dallas fans have become reasonably wary about the postseason because of all the disappointment over the years. But this one had to hit especially hard because I think this was the year where the Cowboys fans really talked themselves into it. They had clearly elevated themselves above Philadelphia. There was a lot of people who believed that they were built to go into San Francisco in a championship game and win. And they just no-showed. That was really stunning to watch. The number of times that Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb had to sort of have that trying to get on the same page conversation on the sidelines, which reared itself in the worst possible fashion when Prescott threw that pick 6 to Darnell Savage near the end of the first half. That pretty much put the nail in the coffin, made it 27-0 at the time. But that was it. Prescott got fooled by the coverage. That he thought he was getting man, and he got zone instead, and he threw into what he thought was going to be a void, and the safety dropped down and picked it. That just summarized for me the entire game. Dallas seemed unprepared and didn't have a response when Green Bay got out of the gate. So they got some soul searching to do in Big D for sure.
I have two. I'm going to start with the team. I'm going to say, or I guess a unit on the team. I guess I could just say the whole team. Cleveland Browns, you all are losers. Big time losers.
You've been waiting to say that. So.
Joe Flacco turns into a pumpkin like I predicted. Turns the ball over, pick 6, as you brought up Dak Prescott. Joe Flacco did it well before Dak Prescott did on Saturday. And what about that Browns defense? The Browns defense, and all we heard as Steeler fans about all year, oh, we're the best defense in the league. Myles Garrett, a complete no-show. I mean, a complete no-show in the postseason. That is, to me, the biggest loser. And I think sometimes the early Saturday games kind of get forgotten because of the Sunday and the Monday games. They're freshest in our mind. When you go back to that Houston game, that Cleveland team played like absolute dog crap. And so when they're the Browns, and what we always say Pittsburgh fans, when it's Brown, flush it down, that's exactly who that was an unbelievably horrible performance. So that's my first one. Any thoughts on the Browns, Coach?
Well, I like that TJ Watt had as many sacks as Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons combined, and he didn't even play.
That's true. Myles Garrett was a no-show, like an absolute no-show. My second loser, and this is going to be kind of with your son, Detroit Lion fans. So you have men weeping in the that's fine. It's emotional. They haven't won a playoff game in a long time. That's not why I'm upset. How in the hell do you boo Matthew Stafford? How do you boo Matthew Stafford when he comes out of the tunnel for the Rams? I know it's a playoff game. I know it's important. But that guy gave everything that he ever had to that organization when he was there. And he was traded. He didn't burn it down like Antonio Brown and force his way out. He was traded to the Rams, and you got Jared Goff. I thought that was unbelievable. We talked about this on the Fans First Football show last week, and we both said, myself and Rob, like, hey, Lions fans, you can't boo this guy. Like, you cannot boo this guy. He did not leave on bad terms, and they booed him. So I think they're losers for that.
I don't know the backstory that well, but I read an article from a writer at the Detroit Free Press who kind of remembers it a little bit differently. And
Really?
his take on it was Stafford made a lot of demands when he was in Detroit, that he got 2 coaches fired. He didn't name which 2 coaches in the article. That he basically decided that when when Detroit wasn't going in a direction where he felt he could win, that he did sort of force his way out of there. Now that again, that was his take on the situation, and that he was angry that Stafford gave that backhanded "I'm happy for the players" response in his press conference afterward, as opposed to saying "I'm happy for the city of Detroit," yada yada. So
We are drawing
I'm
some
not familiar enough
conclusions.
with how it all went down to weigh in, but
Any other losers for you, though, on the weekend? I mean, the
the
Dallas Cowboys
Eagles,
were ugh,
the Eagles were just again,
brutal.
man. They I don't know what happened in Philadelphia, but there was a clear lack of desire. The Eagles, they no-showed a couple of their final regular season games. They were horribly unenthusiastic in the season finale against the Giants, and that just carried into the wild card game. Jason Kelsey announcing that he's retiring, it felt as though like the soul of that team, somehow disappeared later in the season, and Nick Sirianni could never get it back. And now there's actual conversation. I don't think it's going to happen, but there's actual conversation that Sirianni could get fired there. You rewind 3 months, and he was everybody in town. He was their boy. He's a Philly guy. He's our guy. And now half the fan base wants him fired. It's incredible how quick fortunes change in Philly.
Could you imagine if the Cowboys would have won and Philadelphia lost? Like, that would be unbearable for you. I mean, being around those Philly fans would be unbearable. I think the only thing that they have that they're like, fine, the whole NFC East is out now. Like, the Cowboys lost 2, so whatever. But Pez's picks is going to be interesting this week.
Yeah.
Our boy
Yeah,
Pez is
he'll double down on like if you push him on anything, he'll double down on it. So you can see if you can get him to bite on something.
I'll work on that. All right, let's go to our third topic, the Steelers. Yeah, you brought it up, but we got to talk about it because they did make the playoffs. How should this season be remembered? Overachieving, maybe underachieving? They did get 10 wins. Was it a disappointment? What's your epitaph for the 2023 Steelers?
It's tricky, isn't it? It's a tricky season to
It is
evaluate.
very.
There are times when you look at the season as a whole and you say, how the heck did Mike Tomlin get this team to 10 wins with all the injuries that they had, with horrendous quarterback play, with an offensive coordinator who clearly wasn't ready for the NFL, with one of the most vanilla schemes in the league? How many coaches could have gotten that team to 10 wins? And then you kind of step back and look at it a little bit differently and say, how did this team lose at home to Arizona, to New England, to no show basically in Indianapolis when it looked like their season was on the line there? That the lulls in the season and the dissension and the selfishness that kind of reared its head at times were an indicator that maybe Tomlin didn't have the command over the locker room that he's had in the past. So it's a conflicting season. For me, it's a success because you got those young players some playoff experience. You battled through that adversity. Mike Tomlin was able to sort of, reclaim the locker room or right the ship. Whatever happened in that terrible 3-game losing streak, he was able to correct it. And again, I know the result was what it was in that playoff game, but if the Steelers score when they have second and goal at the Buffalo 4 in the second quarter when it's 14-0, who knows? Because once they kind of, that big burst by Buffalo, once they got past that, they played the Bills evenly. So I'm leaning towards it being a successful season.
I'm not going to disagree with anything that you said, but for me, for every time you say a positive, there's a negative that can cancel out the positive. So, yes, a lot of injuries. Mike Tomlin, you feel like he was losing the locker room. They get rid of Matt Canada. I would view that as a positive because sometimes you got to make those tough decisions. We talked about that on this show. But the one thing that that makes me pause about saying it was a positive season is the fact that now we enter an off season and the Steelers don't have a quarterback. They have the biggest question mark on the team is the most important position on the team, and that's quarterback. Mason Rudolph's about to hit free agency. Will they bring him back? Should they bring him back? That's a discussion that we'll have to have at some point. Kenny Pickett, what's his deal? Do they still believe in the guy? He's still going to be on the team. There was a lot of people upset that he didn't even meet with the media as after they did the locker cleanouts. All the other captains did. He just got out of there, didn't speak to anyone. So where's his head? I mean, this is going to be a tumultuous offseason for the Steelers, but that's the only thing that I come back to and say, in terms of the rebuild, if Kenny Pickett had played the whole season, they win 10 games, they lose in the wild card round, you could say, you know what? That's some very valuable experience moving forward. But now they enter an offseason where you say, who the hell's their quarterback next year? Are they going to go after a Kirk Cousins, a Russell Wilson, even someone like Jacoby Brissett? Are they going to try and bring back Mason Rudolph? All these questions make me think that, while yes, they did get to the postseason and they did get 10 wins and they were competitive against the Browns, if you want to call it that, I still also go back to the fact that, to me, the rebuild is kind of set back because of the quarterback position. What do you think, Coach?
Right. Two quick thoughts on that. One, obviously, you need a quarterback and an elite one to advance far. I mean, look at the quarterbacks remaining in the AFC. Right. You've got Stroud and Lamar Jackson and Mahomes and Allen. I mean, that's a who's who of the best guys in the league. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, here's what's frustrating about the Steelers. How do you get an accurate read on Kenny Pickett, given the fact that Matt Canada was his coordinator for the first year and a half? I mean, he only played 5.5 quarters post Matt Canada, but they might have been the best 5.5 quarters he played all season. I mean, statistically, he was great in those last in that game and a half that he played before he got injured under Mike Sullivan and Eddie Faulkner. So the Steelers need a NFL level coordinator who can develop a quarterback, who can install a comprehensive modern passing game. And it feels like, for me, almost impossible to evaluate Kenny Pickett fairly without that. So that's what's frustrating. It's almost like you gotta find out again next year. And I mean, how many seasons are you going to spend finding out?
And I'll say this about the Steelers and mainly Mike Tomlin. You give him credit for the turnaround and dealing with adversity, but I don't want to hear anyone talk about the non-losing season anymore. Steeler fans never like that anyways. The dude hasn't won a playoff game since the 2016 season. Like, getting there is one thing, Coach, but don't you just have to win when it matters? I mean, that's what it boils down to with me. Getting to the playoffs, good job. For some teams, they relish in that and they celebrate that. But if you can't win a playoff game, what are we talking about? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, it's not even and it's not even winning. They've been outscored 66-0 in the first quarter of their last 5 playoff games combined, which means that these games are over at the end of the first quarter. These are no-show performances, and they go back to 2016. The entire roster's turned over. All the coordinators have turned over. The only constant's Mike Tomlin. Yeah. And, I'm a big Mike Tomlin fan, but that is a huge black mark on your record that you can't get your team prepared to show up in a playoff game against 5 different opponents. So it's not like, oh, it's the Belichick thing or anything like that. Right. So obviously that's a huge problem and something that has to be corrected going forward. But if I'm Mike Tomlin, he still seems to have some leverage. It feels like the Rooneys want him back. There was talk about him maybe stepping away. He said the other day he's coming back. If I'm him, I'm going into the Rooneys and I'm saying, show me the list of coordinators you're willing to hire. We cannot keep hiring coordinators on the cheap, elevating guys from the college level, pulling up guys that have never done the job before. We got to get an established guy who knows what the hell they're doing so that we can develop Kenny Pickett and give ourselves a shot when it gets to the nitty-gritty in the playoffs. And he's got to be able to lay those demands, I feel, because for me, one of the most damning things has been their refusal to spend good money on proven coordinators on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and you've got teams that are cutting ties with coordinators on the regular. Like yesterday, Cleveland cut their ties with their offensive coordinator, and I think I don't know, maybe the running backs coach or offensive line coach. So they got it. That's going to be a very, very interesting facet of this offseason for the Steelers is how are they going to handle the offensive coordinator, the quarterback. So yes, some would say it was a successful season. There's a lot of questions to be answered. But let's move on. Let's talk about next weekend. We got the championship weekend. We have Green Bay at San Francisco, Houston at Baltimore, Kansas City at Buffalo, and Tampa at Detroit. Which divisional round game are you most looking forward to watching, Coach?
Obviously, Kansas City Buffalo for me is the marquee game. That's the one. I want to see if Patrick Mahomes can win a playoff game on the road. He's never had to go on the road in his entire career. So that'll be very interesting to see how he handles that. Obviously, the weather's going to be rough again. That's a heavyweight fight. Selfishly, though, man, I had such a wonderful time watching that Detroit game with my son. It was the best game of Wild Card Weekend. He's 11 years old now. He really plays football. I coach him. So he's really starting to understand the game. And he's as passionate and irrational and emotional as you can imagine an 11-year-old to be. He can't sit still. He runs around the house with a football in his hand watching. And it was a great dad-son experience to share that together. And so I'm looking forward to doing it again with Detroit, Tampa Bay.
That's the sneaky game. If I were saying like, hey, which game do you think? And everyone's kind of just writing it off and they're just going to push it under the rug. It's the Tampa Detroit game. It's also my upset special of the week right there is Tampa Bay going and Baker Mayfield, man. The way that they played against Philadelphia is the way I wanted the Steelers to play in Buffalo. Go out almost with some reckless abandon at times and just say, we're going to take some shots. Like, let's just go out and let's go down swinging. The Steelers didn't. They were super conservative, super safe. They still turned the ball over. Baker Mayfield's out there chucking the ball to Mike Evans down the field, throwing 3 touchdowns and 300 yards. They're going to be in a dome, so the weather's not going to be a factor. It's going to be, can the Buccaneers keep up with the Lions offense? And that could equate to a shootout. So that's why I think it could be a sneaky good game. But I have to be honest, though. Everyone's going to talk about Buffalo and Kansas City. But the game that I'm really intrigued by is Houston at Baltimore. And it's nothing to do with the Steelers-Ravens ties. It has everything to do with the ghost of 2019 that's already being discussed here in the state of Maryland. They did the same thing. They got by number 1 seed. They rested everyone in week 18. They haven't played meaningful snaps since December, I think. And you have to wonder, is there going to be rust? And are they going up against CJ Stroud? CJ Stroud that we talked about last week with our player profile, who talk about going in with nothing to lose. He has nothing to lose. You're a rookie quarterback. Go out there and sling the rock, throw it to Nico Collins down the field, put some pressure on Lamar Jackson and company because they're the ones that are going to have the pressure on them. I'm also really looking forward to seeing what CJ Stroud can do in Baltimore. It's not going to be easy, but I think that's going to be an exciting game too. I hope it's an exciting game. It could also be a blowout.
I'm so impressed with Houston's offensive coordinator, Bobby Slowick. The more I break down their games, they do some really creative stuff, but he just has such a good feel for when to call certain plays. For a quick example, Houston hit for a home run in their playoff game, a boot flood concept, but the tag would be what we call COP, which stands for corner post. And I mean, it's pretty simple. It's just a regular boot flood concept, which is an overload. And you got a low route, an intermediate route, and a high route. But what they did instead, because they understood the fast flow nature of the defense, is that they turned that high route into a throwback post. And it was just a perfectly timed call that anticipated the flow of the defense within the framework of the game. It's like if you could have dropped that call in at the perfect moment when the defense was perfectly set up for it. Slowick dialed that up, and I think play calling is a combination of art and science. You know, it's a science in that you've studied all the numbers and the tendencies, and you've done your analytics, but it's also an art in that there's just a feel, and you just have to know when's the right time to call a certain play because of the flow of the game. And I think Bobby Slough has got that feel. So I'll be really interested to see what he does against that Baltimore defense because he's hot right now and he's got a hot quarterback, and that's a great combination.
He's also getting some looks as a head coach for next year. There's some people requesting interviewing for him. Well, but I want to ask you, what's your thoughts on my take on the rust of the Ravens? Is that something that as a coach would concern you? The fact that your starters, and yes, they were really banged up. Kyle Hamilton, Marlon Humphrey, Zay Flowers. I mean, I could go down the list of players that were banged up and they wanted to rest them. Odell Beckham Jr. Is that something that would concern you as a coach? Would you have played Week 18 the way that they did, or would you have changed it up?
I think if the weather conditions had been a little bit different for Week 18, I might have played those guys.
A good point.
But then you get in that pouring rain that they had for that game with Pittsburgh and bad footing and all those things, and now you really start to worry about injury. I mean, those conditions are tough on the body. And so I understand the decision to rest those guys. Now, would I worry about rust? Absolutely, I would. Yeah. But I don't blame them for sitting those guys in Week 18.
It'll be interesting. Like I said, shades of 2019 when they went one and done, and they still talk about it here in Maryland, how they shouldn't have done it, and they did the same exact thing. Go Texans. All right, let's finish up the last thought here. In non-playoff news, the coaching carousel is turning, and it continues to turn. Give me your best hot take on who will fill one of the available openings, or where a big-name coach like maybe Jim Harbaugh from college or Bill Belichick might land. Since the last time we talked, there's been even more openings. Pete Carroll out. They made I think since last week, that was when Belichick was officially gone from New England. They made that official. Jared Mayo takes that spot. This is interesting. What do you think, Coach?
Well, everybody's waiting on Dallas. What's Jerry Jones going to do with Mike McCarthy? If we're talking hot takes, I want to say Belichick to Dallas. That would break the internet. But if you're Bill Belichick and you're probably looking at this being your last job in the NFL, do you want to go work for Jerry Jones?
No.
I just can't imagine Bill Belichick would want that. So I don't, so my hot take, I don't think it's that hot a take because he's already interviewed there. But I think Harbaugh is going to wind up with the Chargers. I think that he's done what he everything he could possibly do at Michigan, unless he wants to just be a college coach for the rest of his life, which why would anybody want to do that right now with the NIL stuff? I mean, Nick Saban said as much when he announced his retirement. He basically said, I don't want to recruit my own players. And that's what we have to do now. And while Jim Harbaugh seems to be egotistical enough to like the fact that high school kids might idolize him, I think he's probably ready to move on. And if you're moving on and you've already interviewed with the Chargers and you got the opportunity to go have Justin Herbert be your quarterback, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, my hot take is kind of something we talked about already, and I think that Nick Sirianni's going to get fired. I think there's going to be an opening in Philadelphia, and this is where it gets weird because you have a Bill Belichick out there, you have Jim Harbaugh out there, you have a Mike Vrabel out there. If I'm a head coach, I'm not trying to jump into any opening right away. Because if I'm, yes, Jared Mayo, that was set up. You could tell that was set up. They announced his hiring the day of, I think, Bill Belichick's press conference when he said he was leaving. So if I'm Mike Vrabel, though, I'm looking at things and saying, I want to make sure I have the best opportunity possible. Now, Bill Belichick has interviewed with Atlanta in their opening. But again, you might be waiting to see if Philadelphia opens up because that is a really good roster. And they are only a few players away from being a Super Bowl contender again. So that's where my hot take is. But if I had to guess, Harbaugh to LA or even Las Vegas makes a lot of sense. But again, we'll see. I don't know. Do you think Sirianni's going to be fired?
It wouldn't shock me. I mean, Jeffrey Lurie does not suffer fools. He's a guy who is pretty serious about wanting to win. And Sirianni strikes some people in this area as a bit of a poser, that he's got a little bit of a shtick that he wants to be the Philly tough guy, but he's not really the Philly tough guy. The name that would be really interesting, excuse me, if Sirianni got fired is Mike Vrabel, because I think that's a personality that fits what the Eagles want to be. And what they stopped being under Sirianni. They stopped being the punch you in the mouth team that was just going to be more physical and do a lot of lot of stuff on the perimeter with their athletes when you tried to stop them from being overly physical. And Mike Vrabel, that's who he is. And I think that's who Nick Sirianni wanted to be. And I think there's a big difference.
It'll be interesting to see how things play out there in the city of brotherly love. Let's do our player profile to wrap up the show. You want to talk about a guy that I've never been fond of in terms of potentially being that guy, and that is Jared Goff. Go ahead, Coach.
Yeah, all that attention that was given to Matthew Stafford with him coming back to Detroit and excuse me, and the animosity from the Detroit fans and Stafford's post-game interview and all of that. I think lost in all of that was the fact that stadium pregame, 70,000 fans chanting in unison, Jared Goff, Jared Goff. And the appreciation that he showed afterwards, getting a little bit emotional and choked up and feeling as though like he delivered, they believed in him. They welcomed him. And then he was able to go out and play a tremendous football game. He was 22 out of 27 passing. He didn't turn the ball over. The throw he made to Amon-Ra St. Brown coming out of the 2-minute warning when Detroit needed to make a first down or they were going to have to punt the ball back was an absolute laser. And that was like a confident quarterback playing at the top of his game in a big moment. And that was really cool to watch. So I just felt like that was Jared Goff's moment. And the Lions may never win a Super Bowl with him. They've got the roadblock that is San Francisco. If they can get past Tampa this weekend, I don't think they're going to be able to do that. Jared Goff may have a ceiling that's not quite Super Bowl winning, but he had an awesome moment. And I was really happy for him. And obviously to be the guy that brought the city of Detroit their first playoff win in over 30 years is pretty cool.
No, absolutely. And I have said, I'm not a believer in Jared Goff, but that's as a player, like as a human being, he seems like a great guy. He didn't ask to be traded to Detroit, goes in with, Dan Campbell, and they seem to have a good relationship and a good working construct there. And good for Jared Goff and good for the Detroit Lions. I know I said, hey, I didn't like that they booed Matthew Stafford, but when they showed grown men weeping, like anyone that's survived through a long period of time. I can say this as a Pittsburgh Pirate fan, 20 years of losing seasons. Okay. This isn't like a playoff drought. This is like you didn't win more than you lost. Like I lived through that. So when they did finally get over that proverbial hump and they made the playoffs in 2015, the blackout game with Andrew McCutchen and the Reds, I didn't cry, but man, there was a part of me that was like, this is amazing. I didn't know if I would ever see this. And that's crazy. So Detroit Lion fans, good for you. Jared Goff, good for you. Excited for that team. And I think that if we're to get a shot at San Francisco, they're a team with Dan Campbell that will throw everything and the kitchen sink at them to try and get to the Super Bowl. And that'll be fun to watch because you just don't know what you're going to get. But now, kudos to Jared Goff. Coach, any final thoughts on Super Wildcard Weekend?
Well, there were 6 games. 5 of them were not very, very competitive.
Yeah.
So while we love watching the spectacle of the playoffs and the competition at that level, hopefully in the divisional round this coming weekend, we'll get some better games, because when they are great games like that Detroit LA game, that's some of the best football you can watch.
Absolutely. I hope so. And we'll be back next week to talk about all of the divisional round games and to preview the upcoming championship games a little bit. But Coach, what's coming up on the call sheet this week?
So the call sheet, obviously we're going to take a look at the playoffs a little bit. It's episode number 40. So we're going to do a little profile on Gale Sayers, the legendary running back from the Chicago Bears. And then we've been doing a bunch of call sheet breakdowns. We're doing a one-play breakdown for every playoff game. They're running about 7-8 minutes long. So if you get an extra minute or two, pop over to our YouTube channel and check those out. The Steelers are up next. So we're profiling the interception in the end zone that turned that game around. Jeff, when you see the play design, you're have a trash can nearby. It's a horrendous play design, and it makes sense why they lost that game when you think about it.
That's awful. I really don't want to watch that, but I will anyways because I'll learn something from it. So where can they find you on social media though, Coach?
At KT Smith FFSN.
All right, perfect. You can find me on social media at jhartman, HARTMAN_PIT. I do a lot of stuff, so just follow me there and you can get everything. If you want our Steelers coverage, check us out, the Steel Curtain Network. That's steelcurtainnetwork.com, as well as everywhere we get any type of information, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, we're there. Search Steel Curtain Network. Coach, thanks for another great show. We'll talk next week.